Rockefeller Brother Fund, also with support from USAID and Vermont Law School. I'm doing a project called Cooperative Competitors, building new U.S. energy and climate networks. And a number of you in the room are some of my mafia. I recognize you. And we've been exploring through meetings, research, and just more networking around town and around the world. What are some areas where, U.S.-China energy and climate cooperation, where are some of the benefits, where are some of the challenges, what next? I'm just doing my little talkative intro, getting everyone settled in here. And so, as I say almost every meeting too, that I have a very good job. Because in looking at, on focus on issues on China, a very area where there's a lot of positive trends going on in cooperation, not only just with government, but business and NGOs. And today, we are here to look at U.S.-China private sector cooperation in the power sector. So kind of a funky focus, a little bit narrow, but I have a group of really sharp men up here. One added last minute. I'll let you know who he is down at the end of the table here. So we're going to, it's kind of like a roadmap for economic growth for both countries. It was kicked off, and they'll tell you more about it. Duke Energy commissioned a study looking into just the question of power sector cooperation. What does it mean for the United States for jobs and whatnot? They'll give you the details. And when I heard that was happening, I said, I need to have you guys come and talk when that study comes out. And we were incredibly lucky to have Secretary Locke also come and join us today. He's been going to China with U.S. government. Folks have been heading over to China a lot in the last year. The energy and climate cooperation is ramping up, and I know that Secretary Locke has participated in some of these energy forums and discussions, biz-to-biz cooperation. And so he's actually going to open up the talk today about the Obama administration strategy with China. And again, we can probably tap into some of his insight in participating in some of these clean energy forums. Those of you in the back, come on in. Plenty of seats, plenty of seats. Makes me nervous when you're standing back there. You have his bio, and time is of essence here today. We have busy people. Gary Locke, as you know, is the first Chinese American to be appointed to the post of Secretary of Commerce in a president's cabinet. When he was governor of Washington State, did a lot to encourage trade between Washington State and China, and led to, in his tenure, he evidently created, the state gained like 280,000 jobs, and which happens to be kind of the theme of our meeting today. So he's going to open up and talking about his insights into this topic. And then we're going to have invite Jim Rogers, who's the chairman of the board and president and chief executive officer of Duke Energy. He's got more than 21 years experience as a chief executive officer in the electric utility industry. He would be the go-to guy if you have questions in the sector. And he's going to be talking about the job study and give a little intro, which then his colleague David Muller and Dr. Sun Yunquan will pick up on the cooperation between ENN and Duke Energy. And I'm going to stop talking because you didn't come here to listen to me. You came to hear these guys. So I'd like to invite Secretary Locke to come on up to give a talk to China Environment Forum folks. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Jennifer, for the introduction and for kind of moderating this presentation. It's also good to see Dave Mohler again. We were on a trade mission to China together. But I especially want to say how delighted I am to be even sharing the podium and this segment of the program with Jim Rogers. And he and I have had a great opportunity to really chat and be in on a whole host of different functions, really focusing on the role of clean energy and the emerging new role of utility companies all across America. And I'm sure he'll talk a little bit more about that later. Also a distinct pleasure to be here with Dr. Sun Yunquan, and so thank you very much for your insights that you'll be offering in just a few minutes. As recently as 35 years ago, the economic and trading relationship between China and the United States was virtually non-existent. But over the past 3 decades, our economic and trade ties have evolved into one of the most important bilateral relationships in the world. And since being sworn in as Commerce Secretary, I've journeyed to China 4 times already. It's also where both my parents were born, and I've had the occasion to visit China dozens and dozens of times in the last 20 years. And during that time, I've witnessed the amazing transformation of China, the rise of a robust middle class, rapid modernization, and the lifting of almost 200 million people out of poverty. As part of this evolution, China has become our China and the United States, actually, are each other's second largest export destination markets. But the growing volume and the complexity of trade over the last 30 years has brought new challenges. Issues surrounding intellectual property protection, barriers to trade, including the Chinese policy of indigenous innovation and currency valuation. These are concerns not just of U.S. businesses and the United States government, but of businesses and governments all around the world. And the United States has been and will continue to be frank in our discussions about these issues because a mature trading relationship demands nothing less. We will continue to use such forums as the Strategic and Economic Dialogue and the upcoming U.S.-China Joint Commission on Commerce and Trade to resolve market access issues for U.S. producers and investors. We will continue to press for the adoption of market-based exchange rate mechanisms. And at the G20 and in other multilateral venues, we have joined China in committing to do our part to contribute to the rebalancing of the global economy. We welcome strong growth in the Chinese economy because that growth has provided unprecedented opportunities for generations and millions of Chinese citizens who otherwise that they otherwise would never have known. And continued economic growth and robust trade between our two nations will continue to deliver benefits to the peoples of both China and the United States. American companies offer world-class products and services that can help China meet its growing domestic demand, but also meet its goal to improve the quality of life for its people, from medicines and medical devices to food, environmental cleanup, clean energy, high technology, financial services, and education, just to name a few. And that trade is trade that is mutually beneficial to both peoples. At the same time, such trade opens opportunities for U.S. workers and businesses and contributes to worldwide rebalancing, a worldwide rebalancing in which Americans buy a little bit less and save more, and in which we also sell more to China and the rest of the world, helping to create a more prosperous future for everyone. In no area is that win-win situation more clear than in the energy sector. This industry holds incredible promise to spur innovations and create new jobs in both of our nations and to act as an antidote for our addiction to fossil fuels. China and the United States are the world's leading emitters of CO2 and leading importers of foreign oil. These facts, if not addressed, will significantly impact our environment and our businesses, and indeed our entire way of life. And they are not, however, unexpected problems given China's rapid development. For generations, millions of Chinese lived in small one-roomed houses. They lived the basic necessities of modern life: refrigerators, washing machines, computers, the list goes on. Most often in the rural areas, cooking was done over small wood or coal-powered stoves. But in the last decade, millions of Chinese from villages around the country have moved out of poverty and into the middle class. And along the way, they've embraced energy-hungry amenities like that Americans and other people from other developed countries take for granted, whether it be automobiles to air conditioning or even refrigerators. And this is just the beginning, because China has 700 million rural inhabitants, many of whom will aspire to and achieve the comforts of middle-class living in the years ahead. And therefore, China is expected to spend some $3.1 billion to meet its electricity demands by 2030. It's critical that we seize the moment to address this daunting challenge. And in May of this year, I led a successful clean energy trade mission to China to provide U.S. companies an opportunity to showcase their cutting-edge goods and services and technology. And the United States-China Energy Cooperation Program, which Premier Wen Jiabao signed along with President Obama last November, is already producing results, including biofuels project being launched by U.S. companies in coordination with China's National Energy Agency. President Obama has said that clean, green jobs are the jobs of the 21st century. But some suggest that the race for those jobs is a zero-sum game, saying clean energy development technology or technology development in China would be detrimental to the U.S. market. The report that we see today from the Garten Rothkopf indicates the opposite. Accelerated development of energy technologies, such as those discussed in the report, could create hundreds, if not millions, of new jobs in the United States and in China. Cooperative methods to implement projects in carbon capture and sequestration, supercritical coal, scalable photovoltaic solar power, and smart grid technology can drive successful partnerships between our two great countries. Energy firms that are already taking advantage of opportunities in solar, wind, and battery production, like Duke Energy, are benefiting from U.S. and Chinese investments to grow their operations, create new jobs, and establish global supply chains that reduce costs. We need to use models that already work and replicate their successes in critical new areas like smart grid technology and carbon capture. Increasing our economic cooperation will enable more Chinese to buy American-made goods, and this dovetails with President Obama's National Export Initiative, which seeks to double U.S. exports over the next 5 years, supporting millions of new jobs in the process. You know, the National Export Initiative was launched in March, but it's already paying great dividends. Today, because of a strengthening world economy, but also stepped up efforts across the federal government, exports are helping to lead our nation's economic recovery. Exports are up roughly 18% over the first 8 months of this year compared to the same period a year ago. U.S. exports of manufactured goods have increased 22%. Agricultural exports are projected to be the second highest in U.S. history, with a trade surplus of some $30.5 billion. But we can do better, and indeed we must. And under the National Export Initiative, there's going to be more credit available for exporters, a sharper focus on knocking down trade barriers that prevent U.S. companies from accessing foreign markets, and also more government trade promotion. President Obama is committed to working cooperatively with all of our trading partners to ensure that trade is as free and as fair as possible. And to that end, along with my co-chair, Ambassador Ron Kirk, I will be personally working hard to resolve trade and investment issues with China at the upcoming Joint Commission on Commerce and Trade meetings in Washington, D.C. later this year. I'm confident that that effort, along with the sustained focus that the National Export Initiative focuses or places on all facets of trade, will allow the United States, China, and countries all around the world to take full advantage of the economic and environmental benefits of the burgeoning clean energy economy. Let me just close by underscoring again how the Chinese-American relationship can continue to be a win-win for both of our countries. China will continue to play a major part in a sustained global recovery that lifts all nations. As trade and investment in each other's economies grow, both Chinese and Americans will have better access to economical and high-quality products and services that can make significant improvements in all of our lives. We've already seen how the incredible growth in China's middle class has spurred demand in China for American goods and services, which have provided value for Chinese consumers and helped create jobs here at home in America. At the same time, high-quality, low-cost goods made in China and sold in the United States have meant more disposable income for Americans to be used for health care, retirement, college education of our children, other necessities, and indeed leisure. That is what a win-win relationship looks like, where our strengths complement one another and where our successes amplify economic growth in each other's economies. I'm confident that this partnership, especially in clean energy, will continue to strengthen over time, and we will all be the better for it. Thank you very much.
As Pete and Cushing grab the mics, I get to ask you one question because I'm the chair. I think a lot of people aren't really aware that new the U.S. China Clean Energy Program, that's a public-private partnership. And I've heard there's 22 companies, and I'm curious, what are you doing with that? Where do you see that going? I mean, there was a trade mission. Can you tell us a little bit
Well,
about that
first of all,
program?
that was a venture launched over a year ago in one of our first trade missions to China, along with Secretary of Energy Steve Chu. And we have cooperation by the private sector and the governments on both sides. And for instance, the Boeing company and working with the Chinese airliner are looking at, for instance, biofuels to power our jet airplanes and commercial airplanes. And so there's a whole bunch of research, joint research being conducted, and partnerships testing some of these ideas using American and Chinese companies and nonprofit organizations and research institutions. So this is really the model of how we can jointly develop technologies and jointly own the intellectual property, and then be able to provide the benefits of that to people all around the world.
Okay, good. Yeah, so it complements the new CERC Center. All right. He has limited time, so if you can raise your hand and ask questions very succinct, so we get succinct answers. Raise your hand so I can see. Pete, right there in the center, just real succinct question. Just say your name and affiliation, too, if you don't mind.
Secretary Locke, my name is Irving Mincer. I'm with MEG. Last week there was a confrontation between Japan and China over an impounded fishing boat that resulted in the Chinese apparently banning exports of rare earth metals and others that are critical to the development of wind turbines, advanced vehicles, energy-efficient lighting. Do you have an opinion about how the China's using its trade weight in the rare earth sector may affect U.S. China cooperation on clean energy, shifting the geopolitical context for these cooperative developments?
Well, first of all, I'm pleased that in that situation the Chinese and the Japanese are meeting again and discussing, and so we hope that that dialogue will progress and that there will continue to be a free flow of those very rare earth metals and minerals. And that's something that I think all the countries perhaps will have to address in the upcoming G20. But we need to have that multinational dialogue, and especially on some of these very rare metals that specific countries may have a greater abundance of than other countries. And obviously that's key to free flow of trade, as well as the development of new industries. And so I'm pleased with the recent developments, and let's just hope that the dialogue continues.
Okay, Samantha, right down front here. Oh, and you need a mic, though. We're webcasting, unless you can shout really loud.
I don't think so. Thank you so much. I'm Margaret Ryan. I'm with Energy Now News. There have been complaints from manufacturers, both here and in Europe, of wind turbines in particular, and that they didn't get a chance in China, that the Chinese industry, building in China is basically restricted to indigenous companies. Is that, do they have a basis for thinking that? And if not, what do you see coming in that area?
Well, first, a year ago at the JCCT meeting conducted in China, we were able to, the Chinese agreed to lift some of their restrictions on foreign companies doing business in the clean energy sector, especially with respect to wind turbines. And while we were very pleased with that development, we've since noticed the new policy on indigenous innovation, which also would cover wind turbines and other clean energy technologies and products. So that is why I think you've seen the United States, but not just the United States, but countries from all around the world expressing their concerns about the proposed indigenous innovation policy of China. We're pleased that the Chinese have withheld the enactment of that, have not listed or published a catalog that would list those innovators or companies that would be favored under Chinese procurement. So we're continuing that dialogue, but it's of great concern, and not just in the United States, but to countries and businesses throughout the world. And it is a specific topic of discussion between the United States and China, and that was one of the outcomes of the SNED, to have more dialogue and discussions. In the meantime, the Chinese have not moved forward with that proposal. Great.
Okay, maybe one more question here at the edge.
Hi, Doug Palmer with Reuters. About a month ago, the steelworkers filed a petition with USTR alleging that there were the Chinese government was providing a lot of illegal subsidies to promote the development of clean energy in China to the detriment of production here in the United States, and basically asking USTR to launch an investigation. I know you're at the Commerce Department, not USTR, but I guess my question is, here the theme is stressing cooperation between the U.S. and China on clean energy. Would it be counterproductive for the U.S. to be filing WTO cases against China on clean energy subsidies at this time?
Well, while we are making incredible progress on cooperation and engaging in joint research and development projects with the Chinese, and we need more of those types of collaborative efforts. Nonetheless, each country has the right and I think a responsibility to enforce our trade laws, especially international trading regimes and trade laws. And so you see that happening whether it's other countries filing grievances against companies within the United States, or the United States companies and through the government filing grievances against companies, whether it's in Canada or Europe and so forth. We have an international trading regime, and all countries must abide by that. Otherwise, we engage in trade wars and protectionist policies, and we will not be able to have cooperative projects. So I think that for cooperation to be successful, it has to be founded on a international-based trading regime.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
And I know that you're a busy guy.
Everybody's busy.
Everyone's busy. No, and I know that you have to zip out to meeting, but I really want to thank you for coming and yeah.
Thank you.
And thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. But see that the question about the jobs, the green jobs, we're going to dig deeper now. I'm going to invite Jim Rogers to come here to look at what is really the power sector it's different. It's a unique sector of cooperation and a kind of story that I think, and he's not doing the PowerPoint, by the way. Okay. So you can just put it down. So you come on up.
Thank you.
He's going to be low tech on us today. We got low tech. They get higher tech as the meeting goes on. But we're going to just open it up and tell us your story about this green job study.
Thank you so very much. I am delighted to be here, and thank you all very much for sharing part of your afternoon with us to really talk about what we're trying to achieve in our relationship with companies in China and how this is just one path forward in terms of building a stronger relationship between our two countries. U.S. and China have and face similar challenges in the power sector. Let me give you a few statistics. Together, we consume 42% of the energy that's consumed in the world. Both of our countries are dependent on coal. About 50% of the electricity in the U.S. comes from coal. About 80% of electricity in China comes from coal. U.S. and China are the two largest emitters of CO2 in the world. And as you step back and look at the challenges in front of us, in order to meet energy demands with traditional and renewable fuels, both countries will need massive investments to build out new infrastructure in China and to modernize existing infrastructure in the U.S. In China, they are projected to spend roughly $3.1 trillion cumulative on electricity by 2030. Secretary Locke and I have the same number. I'm happy for that.
You didn't just steal it, did you?
No. It was already in my text.
Okay.
But I made a note that it was the same. It's good to be speaking with one voice or close. We have last year, or in 2007, the Chinese spent $35 billion on electricity infrastructure. Contrast that a moment with the U.S. In the U.S., we also need huge investments in electricity. We're expected to spend roughly 2.1 trillion cumulatively by 2030. But let me give you two other stats that are important and why we have a sense of urgency in terms of finding a way forward. Because for people like me and CEOs of power companies, job one for us is to provide affordable, reliable, clean electricity 24/7, 365 days a year. So our challenge after 50 years of the real price of electricity being flat is that we see the real price of electricity really climbing in the future for several reasons, and just two of the reasons are these. One is that we believe by 2020, virtually 1/3 of the coal plants in the United States will be shut down as a consequence of new environmental regulations that we expect to come from the EPA over the next 4 to 5 years. But if you look out even further, by 2050, virtually every power plant in the United States except hydro, and assuming we don't extend the licenses on our nuclear units, which are 60 years old, virtually every power plant's got to be retired and replaced. That is a daunting challenge in terms of investment and in terms of building. And the truth of the matter is we've thought our way through this, it became increasingly clear that the challenge in China, where they're providing universal access in many, many ways, is similar to the challenge in the U.S. While we provided universal access in the 20th century, we have to completely modernize and update our grid, our generation facilities by 2050. I think it's very important to recognize that China will move forward developing and deploying new technologies domestically, which will drive the scaling and commercialization of these technologies globally. I'm going to take a moment here and make an important point. Unlike maybe other products and services, when you're in the infrastructure business, the toughest part of this business is not so much the creation of a new technology, and that's tough, and there is IP around that, but I believe that the actual scaling, there is an IP around that. Because when you scale infrastructure technologies, that's where you get in the second, third, fourth, fifth generation of any kind of technology is where you start to see lower cost, greater efficiency, and you're able to actually bring it online sooner. So I believe, and that's the basis of our request for this study, that the G2, China and the United States, are uniquely positioned to answer the energy and environmental challenges of the globe. I believe that we are smart enough and have a clear enough vision to be able to cooperate and compete at the same time. Let me just take a minute and talk about what's going on in China, and then jump into the study and then finish with a few key points. Chinese utilities are growing annually at 30% plus. I'd love to be there doing that. But that's not the story in the United States. In China, 15 million people are moving into Chinese cities every year, driving nearly unprecedented generation and grid development now and for the foreseeable future. By 2025, China is expected to build 40 billion square meters of floor space in 5 million buildings, or the equivalent of up to 2 Chicagos every year. That's an enormous opportunity for growth. China is now targeting renewables, energy efficiency, smart grid, advanced technologies, and carbon capture and sequestration as new areas of emphasis. But in addition to that, they're building nuclear. They have 24 plants under construction. They're building coal plants. They are building supercritical, ultra supercritical plants and shutting down old coal plants in the country. and they're looking to natural gas as a solution. Let me take a moment now and talk about the Garten Rothkopf study. This particular study, and y'all have access to a summary of it out there, this particular study is not focused on the broad U.S.-China relationships overall, but focuses, properly so, in a very narrow way on the prospects for cooperation in the power sector specifically. And I think that is a really important point for me to make. The potential benefits outlined by this study depend on several factors, like a level playing field between the two countries, a fair and balanced currency and trade regime, and a set of rules that are clear and do not inappropriately disadvantage any actors on either side. And so I know those are broader macro issues that we're all debating. I'm assuming them away for the moment, but for the future, because I believe the power of our cooperation and working together is transformative in a world where the demand for energy is key. Everyone in the world knows that the link between clean, affordable, reliable electricity and prosperity is key. And so with that link in mind, I think that we're better able to achieve our energy goals and prosperity for future generation and our environmental goals if we're working together. What we sought to do with this study is to get a better understanding and quantify the potential benefits of collaboration with Chinese power companies. So we at Duke Energy commissioned Garten Rothkopf to do a study aimed solely at understanding the specific economic impact, particularly in terms of jobs, of collaboration with Chinese companies on clean energy projects in the power sector. What we found, and one of the reasons we did this, is before this study, there has been very little analysis on what U.S.-China partnerships in the power sector could mean in terms of the economy of the two countries, in terms of jobs. And so what we really wanted to do is have a clear vision of that. And so what we did in the study is we really drilled down on 4 projects which were modeled in the study. One is Integrated Gasification Combined Cycle, or IGCC. Another is utility-scale solar photovoltaic. The third is clean coal technology. And lastly, smart grid. And the bottom line, and I think this, if you take anything out of my words today, take this conclusion, is that almost 70% of the jobs created are concentrated in the project location, not the source market for capital goods. That's one of the realities of infrastructure businesses. And I want to underscore this because that's a key finding. Now, I'm not going to walk through how the numbers break out in all 4 of these areas. They don't allow CEOs to do detailed work like that. And it's clearly in the study. So I'm going to ask you all to take a look at that. But the number that's so important is that 70% of the jobs are at the location of where the build-out occurs. Let me talk for a moment about our collaboration with Chinese companies to give you a sense of the direction that we're headed and where others could head in the future. With the hope of bringing home the economic benefits of lower cost and faster deployment of new clean energy technologies and increased job creation in the U.S., we have entered into several preliminary agreements with power companies in China. 2 companies, ENN and Hunan, highlight our commitment to cooperating with Chinese companies in order to expand operations, share expertise, and promote job growth, and jointly develop investment opportunities in the U.S. as well as in South America. Let me mention ENN just for a moment. We have worked very closely with them, had a very successful working relationship. We signed a joint agreement over a year ago, and we are focused on developing the construction of utility-scale and distributed solar PV projects in the United States. We're also working together on an algae project where we take carbon out of flue gas, something they've worked on hard in China, we're experimenting with in the Midwest, where they take carbon out of flue gas, accelerate the growth of algae, and convert it into a biofuel. We're working with them on underground co-gasification, smart grid, and as I mentioned before, solar. With Hunan, what we've agreed to do, and this is subject to approval from DOE, is to help them train plant operators for new nuclear plants they're building. We are the third largest operator of nuclear plants in the United States. And one of the things that we have the capability is to share with them our insights in how to better operate nuclear plants going forward. At the same time, we're going to learn, because our engineers are slated to spend time with engineers at their post-combustion carbon capture project in Shanghai. So that's a wonderful example of sharing operational skills, technological capabilities, which are so critical to running a reliable power system. It is my judgment that without engagement and cooperation between China and the U.S. in these areas, both countries will lose. Equally important, consumers and the people in each of these countries will lose. Let me just walk through a couple examples. Take clean coal. If China does not acquire heat-resistant materials or turbines from U.S. firms, Europe and Japan will likely step in with eyes on the market potential created by an additional 547 gigawatts in power capacity needs by 2030. Take solar PV. Absent partnership, China may miss out on the U.S. solar PV market that is expanding rapidly, with annual installations expected to grow more than six-fold by 2014. Finally, look at smart grid. China's goal to roll out a national smart grid by 2020 relies heavily upon foreign technology and expertise in planning to software and materials. These can be acquired from Europe, or these could be acquired from the U.S. So I think in this world where there is a lot of competition, it's important for us to develop strong relationships that mutually benefit both of our countries because of the energy imperative and the environmental imperative we both have. To compete in this age, there is, in my judgment, no alternative to an engagement between China and the U.S. and with collaboration. The best way to move forward is to start with certain activities that pose a minimum risk, build trusting relationships as we are trying to do with our partners, test different working models, and look forward toward deeper engagement in the future. Let me say it another way, and this is stepping back and taking a broader look. To me, this integration, this cooperation on the power sector, and specifically our company with ENN and Hunan and others, is just one rung on what I believe a ladder of cooperation that is needed to encourage other companies to put rungs on the ladder. And the combination, this ladder will embolden the governments of our country to resolve issues and work together, because we will have demonstrated ways to do it in the commercial world, and then it enables our governments to find ways to work together on broader and different issues going forward. I'd conclude by saying we know there are a lot of legitimate issues between the two countries that need to be worked on. Got that. But we are convinced that the power sector, the advantage of collaboration significantly outweighs the disadvantages. Targeted collaborations can deliver new technologies at lower costs and reduce carbon emissions. Most importantly, and walk out of here with this point, most importantly, it can create meaningful number of jobs in both countries as well. And given tough economic times that we're in today, given our energy needs, given our environmental objectives, I believe this kind of cooperation is critical to achieving success for future generations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. And we'll, as we're getting the PowerPoint up, actually, I didn't get to tell you when I met you earlier that actually your points kind of echo one of the first pubs that we put out here was called Crouching Suspicions, Hidden Potential, about U.S. energy and environmental cooperation. But I like your ladder image, too. I just need to find it.
Well, we're not as creative as you. And
I was always worried that, like, can you get, taking a film title and messing with it a bit,
We're just stodgy corporate guys.
Witty and stodgy. Okay, so he's calling that. So as that's coming up, I should note that a last-minute addition, but quite wise. David Muller, who's a Senior Vice President and Chief Technology Officer for Duke Energy, and who is a repeat offender at the China Environment Forum, came last year when you guys were just starting your cooperation. I think it was like just as the ENN, you guys hadn't even signed it yet. Mm-hmm. So you said, I can't say. But so now that the partnership has been more solidified, they're going to do a kind of a ping pong presentation together. I got my technical guys here to talk about the ENN and partnership. And I hope all of you got some of the slides off of the table out there on the study. But I think that this is a perfect example of how, you're showing the partnership, not just this in theory, how it can work. And it's coming. Yes, I see a PowerPoint. Are you two gentlemen ready to...
I'm going to scoot over here so I can watch it.
I'll scooch out of the way a little bit.
Yeah, I would just add to what Jennifer said, if I may, that this is really Dr. Sun's presentation, but as we were going through it yesterday, there are a couple slides in here that are just so emblematic of our partnership that we got to talking about it and looking at each other and said, well, we're partners. Why don't we do this in partnership? So y'all get a twofer as a result. So,
okay. So just make sure you always speak in the microphone, okay, guys?
Okay. Good afternoon, and thank you, everybody, to hear. Actually, it's a presentation from our chairman. And Chairman Wang is his man really started this ENN business from nothing to build it up in 20 years, and we have in 20 years, every year we have more than 35% growth rate, and also now it's a $5 billion asset business, and also every year the revenue is about $3 billion, I'm sorry. Then we have 25,000 employees all over China, distributed into more than 70 cities. That's the basic background for the ENN. And coming back to the first page, because I want to explain to you, is you see after in the recent several years, what the ENN doing is before is energy distribution, most of our business. Where the money we made for now is we try to develop the new technology for renewable energy and for clean coal technology. And that was its That is why you come back to the first page. You see the title we have here, ENN, where it's come from. We got a new name, a new logo, just prepare for this new technology and collaboration with Duke Energy. Then the ENN really means energy innovation. And from following my presentation, you will notice why we call this name. And also another is at the beginning we call Enel Group. For come here American now, it doesn't sound like right. And we say we should have a good name for foreigners to really understand it. That's why we call ENN. Basically, we at the beginning we thought CNN, that's a good name. ENN, just close. That's where it comes from. Actually, we have a lot of people. If you go to China, and then Jim knows, and Dave, they've been in ENN many, many times, and at least you go there, we don't have problem from communication from our stand, and a lot of people can speak English. We're preparing for the international business. Okay, come to the ENN. What is we're focusing on, and comes to this here is really we're calling it carbon economy. What it is, we try to do the same thing like Duke is trying to do, and the same thing as all the Americans doing, all the people around the world doing, reduce the carbon emission. So that's we have to do is we focus on 3 areas basically. One, it is we call the advanced renewable energy. That is now the one we're working with Duke Energy to build the solar farms and produce solar panels. Then the second is really the how to use the coal clean. That's our chairman goes all the time and talk to the people what EN we're doing. Because now, like Jim said, sounds like Jim knows China better than me now. He knows all the numbers there. And at least now, in China, we have 80% of electricity come from the coal. If we don't solve this problem, then it's going to be a big problem for China in the future. And what we do here, we try to use the coal as clean as possible. I don't think we can use the coal as clean as solar, but we can reduce the emission by developing the new technology using the coal. And that is the part Dave and involved very deep with EN. We developed new technology together with Duke. And the last part is, because we try to reduce emission, the best way actually is how to save energy. And that's what we're targeting too. One is we call smart energy. Combine all kinds of technology, try to reduce energy consumption. So that's the 3 technology EN is focusing on. Yes, please.
If I can, one of the things that's very impressive about this from a Duke Energy perspective is the way that ENN is thinking really about the life cycle and every aspect of the life cycle. And, at Duke for several years now, we've been working, for example, on smart grid. But we were really enlightened when we first talked to ENN because of the fact that they see the grid really from all angles and as a completely integrated part, not an isolated part, so that you look at the entire life cycle of everything that goes in as an input to energy production and everything that comes out and how you really optimize that entire utilization. So one of our kind of initial partnership learnings.
Thank you, Dave. Okay, for now we did what we prepare here now is because we believe if we just do it in China, we solve the problem in China. Suppose we assume we solve the problem in China, but you don't solve because we live in the one Earth. We cannot solve the problem for the human being. Then we want to go international, go to the world and do the business. Last year, our chairman and come to the New York. We joined the Clinton Global Initiative together with Duke Energy. We announced to the world we're going to work on reduce the carbon emission by ENN technology. So that's what last year we did. And also last year's Secretary Chu visited China. ENN is really the only business he visited during his trip. During his trip, and the Secretary proposed we build up the U.S. China Renewable Energy Research Center. Unfortunately, we started our research center several years ago, 4 years ago here. We have our R&D center for the clean coal research. Now it's already the national lab for clean coal application in China. ENN is a private business in China. But we are the biggest private energy business in China. But the national lab normally is government owned. lab. This is probably the only one for energy lab. It's owned by a private company. It's a national lab. Then this lab will be the part of the U.S. China Renewable Energy Research Center. So we have part in the U.S. and this is the part for China and responsible for the clean coal technology. And Dave knows better. Probably you can give more description about this technology than me.
Well, let me point out the algae facility in the lower right-hand corner of the slide. As Jim mentioned, part of our work with ENN is we have a portable skid that contains this kind of assembly where we've been able to test the growth of this algae at one of our power plants for about the last 6 months. And we have completed, and interestingly enough, that was done in real, true collaboration. We had, for a period of time, we had 4 engineers from ENN integrated with our team, and then toward the end of the project, 2 engineers who remained and were integrated with our team. And we really worked together on a daily basis to get this up and running and to to operate it and to collect the data. And so we've got the first phase of that data complete. We're analyzing it, and now we're going to move on to the second phase, which will include moving that facility to another one of our plants to test different flue gases, as well as to experiment further with actually beneficial reuses of the algae itself. So this is one of those, I think, really great examples of where this comes together in real time in a very tangible way. So I would just add that.
Thank you. Yep. Now, we talk about that a lot because now the collaboration between Duke and ENN is the major part is technology collaboration. We do try to develop new technology for the energy business. And the other part is, I think here is a good example for how this collaboration can create a job in both China and the United States and benefit both sides. So that's I think this solar part is really a perfect example. At the beginning, to start this project from ENN, is we purchased production line from a prime material. It's called the 8.5 generation solar production line. It's world largest. You look at this picture. This is the world largest single panel. It's 5.7 square meters. So that means we got the world first class solar product out of U.S. technology. When we bought this line, we already created a job for Americans. It's because it's an expensive line and the best technology. Then we take it to China. We install it there. Actually, we work very close with the prime material, Jim knows, and then we make this technology more perfect. Actually, we're very close partner with now. Now we are not only the customer for a prime material, we're their partners. We're helping them to just make the production for the other lines they sold to China and sold to Europe. So that's kind of collaboration because we're the first one can produce the tandem junction solar panels, the biggest one. And that is also, of course, in China, we make it in China, then we use the cheaper labor in China to make the best product cheaper, can be affordable, and we can take it back to the United States and work with Duke and build the renewable energy farm, that's a solar farm. And now we're working on the big pipeline and work on the projects together. And basically, it's at the same time, we're not just bringing product back. We bring our integration technology. Also, under the third economy now, we bring in the Chinese financing into the project too. So that means we build the clean energy for Americans. At the same time, Jim made a very good point. Actually, the job opportunity, Jim's number is 70% job opportunities created where this project is built. So that's where it's going to be built in the United States, all these solar farms. And that is why we say this Duke ENN in the USA, we create a lot of job opportunities for Americans. And that is, this is why I say it's a ENN solar roadmap. Really, we're talking not only ENN, for all the Chinese business, especially private business. You want to go to overseas, it's not like I have a lot of money. I can go there, buy American business. I don't think that will work. That will not work. Even I give you a business, you don't know how to run it. So that's the problem. So now the way we're working together with Duke, now We know we penetrate into the market together. We join together with Duke. Now we have a bigger market. I don't think we have enough products shipped from China. Then we will start considering we build a solar panel manufacturer in the United States, local. That is how you make it work. It's not really at the beginning we take billions of dollars here, build a manufacturer because we don't know what to do. And by the time we know what to do, it's mature, then it's win-win for both sides. So that's, I believe, is a perfect example of how U.S. company and the Chinese company work together.
Absolutely.
And next one, I think I will hand over to Dave again. This is what we're doing together with Duke Energy and Dave involved a lot.
This is actually a great example, and maybe this slide is most emblematic of kind of not only the relationship between ENN and Duke, but also of what Duke is learning from China. So ENN has already initiated construction on this eco-city that they're building in Langfang, and they have this is a fully integrated project. It has a coal gasification facility on site. It's got solar on site. It uses district heat. It really is a complete kind of. It's not. It doesn't have a dome over it, but from an energy perspective, it's really a very self-contained, fully integrated project that uses sort of every scrap of energy that's available. This is actually an extension of what we had been thinking at Duke in terms of, quote, smart grid. And because ENN is building it out now, and it should be done about a year from now, we're going to learn from that. At Duke, we're going to learn from that. And then we're going to be able to bring it back here into our service territories and take what we've learned from that and really very much extend our thinking and what we're capable of doing here. So it's we talk about the scale and the scope and the speed of things in China. This is a great example of how we can leverage that and do better things here in the U.S. as a result. So great example and kind of a comprehensive example of our partnership.
It will be done by next year, and I hope everybody here, when visit China, let me know, so you can stay here. There's a house there for our best employee every year. You can live there.
Can you tell people where Langfang is located?
Langfang is 30 miles south of Beijing, very close to Beijing. You go to Langfang, actually it's faster than go to River's office in Beijing.
River's the Duke China head.
Will the HighSpeed Rail be complete from
Yes, yes.
Okay, so you can
yes.
do HighSpeed Rail.
Yes. Right. And this is a slide my chairman told me you have to tell this to Americans, what it is. Okay. You remember, this is a scene from an Olympic opening ceremony. And this tell you how Chinese invented this printing technology 1,000 years ago. And I'm not showing that technology, I'm showing the character here. He means, I suppose Jim told me, Jennifer told me, a lot of people here know China. I don't know how good you know China.
It's a quiz, everyone. What character is that?
So this is the character, like during the Second World War, we will pronounce it peace, right? For now, we don't need to pronounce peace. Now we say the harmony. So that's what Chinese means. And for thousands of years, there's a reason why when we show this technology, we only show this character, not showing the others, right? Then that's showing the Chinese culture for thousands of years. We believe in harmony. That means this means we have to work together and benefit together. That we create win-win situation. That is really for Chinese how we think, why we should work together. It's the same thing here. That's the page I prepared for my seats. Okay, together. For more narrowly, widely, we say Chinese and Americans, and more specific, Duke and ENN, we can power a better world. So that's what I believe. But we have to work together. We have to be win-win. If anybody lose, he will quit. So that's what I think is my conclusion. If you have questions, if you ask tough questions, yes. I will take it back to Chairman Wang.
So you won't answer, you'll just pass it back to him. Huh?
I will answer the not tough ones.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Some applause for these two guys. I like that slide. So we should go to the peace one. That one's even cooler. So all right. So the time has come for you to ask some hard questions. We have time. We have about 20 minutes, okay? So make sure that you say your name and affiliation so they kind of know where you're coming from. Helps me get to new people in the mafia as well. Hands high if you have a question or comment. About right here.
I'm Chris Lanzett, represent some standards developers in Beijing, among them ASME, American Society of Mechanical Engineers. I'm interested in your views on where smart grid is going in China. I understand that it's far from clear, far from harmonious as far as what direction smart grid is going, that State Grid, for example, has completely different ideas. And what is ENN doing in that regard, trying to overcome some of the resistance?
I start?
Yeah.
Okay.
You start.
Yeah, I start and Dave tell more. Yeah, okay. For ENN, because we are a private business there, we don't have, I don't think we can access the grid because that's government-controlled business. What we're doing is we call it smart energy. We don't call it smart grid. If you notice, I never say smart grid there. Because what we're doing, we try to say, what we do is that we find, this is like an industrial park, right? And we innovate whatever the energy combination, either from the renewable energy or from other energy. We try to help you to reduce energy consumption and try to use whatever we can use, like the geothermal, wind, like fuel cell, whatever combination. And we can manage it for you for 20 years, try to save energy. But we don't touch grid. And I think Dave.
Yeah, I've been talking in China for a couple of years now explicitly about smart grid, and honestly, it took me about a year to figure out that we weren't really talking about the same thing. But when you look at what's going on in China, roughly 80% of the electricity consumed in China goes into industrial production. So the actual residential and commercial load is relatively small. In this country, the residential and commercial load is more like 70% and growing. And so it's really, so the focus is different for that reason. It's also different for the reason that Jim indicated earlier, in that China's still really building out its grid. And when we look at line losses, transmission and distribution line losses in this country, they're, say, 7 to 9%. In China, they can be as high as double that. So China can save a lot of energy, and they're working real hard on this, at working on the transmission system to reduce those line losses and make the transmission system smarter from an energy efficiency perspective. So their focus has been more on that kind of transmission side. Ours has been more on the distribution side and more residential and commercial customers, although China is beginning to move their thinking now a little more down the wire and a little more into that realm. I do think that over the course of the last couple of years, as I've been talking, what I've tended to say when I've spoken on smart grid in China is, take a look at what we've done in the U.S. from 1900 to 2010, and don't do the same thing. That's really kind of been my message. You have an opportunity here. You're building out new infrastructure. Don't build out the stupid analog grid. Build out the smart grid to start with. And even if you don't want to build out, bells, whistles, fancy, frills, and fancy, build it on a platform. Build it on an open, interoperable platform that will enable you in the future, to do what you need to do in a much more fluid way. And I think that that's where they're going now. My most recent conversations over there would give me the perception that is in fact the way things are moving.
One comment, in the United States, I think we've oversold and overhyped smart grid. I actually try not to use that term because I like to think of it simply as providing digital distribution or two-way communication. And think about it, everything that plugs in to our system today is digital except our distribution lines, which are analogs. So we need to kind of catch up with the appliances we serve. The other point that I would make is that two-way communication in the meter is important, but we're seeing other ways to communicate directly with the devices in the home. And that, to me, is another way of thinking about it and defining it. But David's point is really the most important, and that is open architecture, Internet protocol is really key. And I guess my last point, to quote A.C. Clarke, all change is overestimated in the short term, but underestimated in the long term. And I think that is really true about taking our distribution company with two-way communication and two-way communication with devices, because at the end of the day, it's going to be transformative in terms of what energy efficiency looks like in this country.
Okay. And I want to add that if you're interested in this topic, we did a meeting in the summer called Electricity with Chinese Characteristics, where we really dug deep. There's a webcast and a summary, and we're going to be doing more meetings, because your question, to understand what the power sector and smart grid means is a tough one, and dumb grid's important to understand too. Some other questions. How about right next to him there, and then we'll move to this side of the room, which seems neglected. You had a question? She'll be next, okay, Kashin? All right.
Hugh McElrath from Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. My question is about the price elasticity of demand for electricity. As I see my neighbor who runs his air conditioner from, I don't know, March to November, and I run around the house, turning off lights after all of my family. You mentioned that the price of electricity needs to rise on a secular basis. Is it going to provide an economic signal to consumers such that they will consume less, or is that not likely?
That's a good question. I'd start by, as I may have mentioned in my presentation, the real price of electricity has been flat for 50 years. I didn't say it needs to rise, I said it will rise. Important distinction. It will rise because of our investment in aging infrastructure and retiring and replacing our plants with adding renewables. I can go give you a long list of reasons why the real price will rise. It will not, today, it only represents 1.9% of the disposable income of an average family in America. Their cable bill is greater. Their cell phone, if you have teenage children, trust me, it is much greater than your electric bill. And so as a practical point, I believe there are not many people like you, I wish there were more, that value energy efficiency and will go around the house and turn the lights, or maybe you have 15 things on your refrigerator that you do every day to make sure you're using energy wisely. There's a certain group of people that like to compete with their neighbors. You look at your neighbors and how much usage they have versus how much you have, and that competition can drive demand down. But I think at the end of the day, what really is transformative and leads to huge productivity gains in the use of electricity is technology. So that energy efficiency is really totally back of mind in the same way when you throw the switch, you never ask the question, where did the power come from? My bet is you don't have a single thought when you throw the switch, unless the lights don't come on. I'd like for you to envision that energy efficiency in the home is like throwing that switch. And so lights go on and off as you move in and out of rooms. And I'll give you one quick example. And we did this project in South Charlotte where we basically had sensing devices within 100 homes. And the example would be if you turned on your dishwasher, it would be delayed for 30 seconds to 60 seconds while you cycled down the refrigerator, and net the usage in the home would be the same. We were able to reduce usage 20% on the peak, and we polled our customers every week. They saw no difference in the quality of service as a consequence of us being able to do that, but that's using technology. So to leave a provocative thought with you is that I believe in the future, as we redefine the boundaries of our business, that the device will be our customer and the owner of it will be the one that pays the bill.
Yeah. Okay, over here. She had a question.
My name is Sha Wang. I'm with Cybernet Investment. We're mainly working on private equity fund investing cross-border opportunity between China and U.S., mostly in the clean tech space. Exciting to see all the 10 panelists and successful collaboration with Duke Energy and ENN, a successful example of China and U.S. collaborations. My question is, it wasn't really clear to me the collaboration for the ENN with Duke on the solar piece, especially with the AMAT applied material. Are you guys trying to build up a solar manufacturing facility in the United States? And how does Applied, as announced a few months ago, the exit of thin film space in the equipment side, how does that actually affect the collaboration?
Let me touch on it. It's a great coincidence that I'm actually on the board of Applied Material. And that it truly is a coincidence because I really never knew about this particular facility at ENN until I showed up there and said, oh my goodness, that's Applied Material thin film. But I think what Applied Material's done is they've built in Xi'an one of the world's largest research center for solar. And I think they will continue to change technologies, refine technologies. I think the thin film is an important product. I think ENN has taken it to the next level with the research that they have done on it, based on my conversations there. And so I think, as was said, I think longer term, we'll do specific projects in the U.S., but it's clearly in the future that we will jointly build, I believe, more to come, and I'm predicting the future, that we'll be building solar manufacturing facilities here in the U.S., solar panel manufacturing facilities. In an interesting way, a solar panel manufacturing facility is really not different than a coal plant or a nuclear plant. And I could actually see utility companies as a consortium coming together and building manufacturing a solar panel facility in the same way we would come together to build a nuclear plant or any other kind of plant. And that again takes a stretch and a rethinking of what our business model is going forward. But I clearly see the work that ENN has done to really improve that, and as was explained earlier, I see that as part of the build-up. And I see us investing in more than just solar. I see other areas in the energy infrastructure in the U.S. that we will be investing in the future.
Maybe just real quick, can you tell that you talked at lunch about in New Jersey where the actual solar project is going on ground now?
Yes,
just tell us. It's nice to know places, right?
Yes, we are building our first project together with Silicon in New Jersey. It's on a landfill. It's 5 megawatts using our technology. And to a little bit further answer her question is, if you read out their announcement, they said they will stop provide a turnkey solution. They didn't say they stop provide you the PECVD. This is the key equipment.
Right.
And what we were going to do is, because that PECVD is not, nobody else can do. It's only a prime material. But what they are willing to is they provide all their technology to us. We build the line by ourselves, but they provide the key equipment. That's, I think, if we build more lines in China or in U.S., that's the way how we should do it.
So we're saying is that ENN actually taken an initiative of building the integration piece with their PECVDs.
If we need, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Let's do this side of the room one more time. How about the gentleman in the blue and then the woman in the yellow? You're next. Yeah.
Hi, Matt Bandick with SNL Energy. I had a question about trade between the U.S. and China because it's always been a controversial subject, especially recently with the legislation in Congress. I was just wondering, how much do companies like Duke Energy and ENN think about free trade between the U.S. and China, and if so, in what way?
From my perspective, I believe that the U.S. and China, or I call the G2, working together is the key to solving climate change in the world in terms of being able to lead on developing technologies, because only technology will solve the problem in the long term. And so I believe that our government should support, encourage, facilitate companies in our two countries working together to come up with energy, environmental solutions going forward. Because in a sense, if you look at it from U.S. eyes, the imperative in China to really build out their infrastructure is great. Given the amount of usage of energy per capita that we have in this country, energy efficiency should be an imperative for us. And so the ability to work together to develop technologies, I mean, they have the great advantage in China of building a city from raw earth. We have the disadvantage of retrofitting a city. And I think we will learn a lot when they're building them out as they apply more stringent codes and different technologies. So I really think that's part of the answer. Now, the legislation that was I guess, passed by the House and all the other conversations, first of all, for me to comment on it would be above my pay grade. But more importantly, I think at the end of the day, there are a lot of misperceptions in the United States about China. And I think there's some misperceptions in China about the U.S. And I think the only way we resolve those misperceptions is to work together. And if we work together and find a harmonious relationship in our work, that I think things will smooth out on the political level, and we'll find other ways to work together to create benefits for the people in each of our countries.
Okay. Question right here. We'll go real quick. Right here, Christine, up front. Dressed the brightest in the room, so I had to call on you. It's on.
Li Xiaoling from Songling Group. I have too much question, but I try to summarize.
One short one, and then we got to move. Yeah. You can tackle them afterwards.
Yeah, I want to ask a question, Jim. What could you talk about the nuclear security? Your idea, your thinking about how China and the U.S. can work together in the nuclear, because there's some kind of business sensitivities there, but I want to touch that. Secondly, is question to Dr. Sun. There's still a standard, the Chinese producers, in terms of like inverters, those kind of special equipment exporter, they have to meet the standard. So I assume ENN's joint venture with with Duke with Prime Material is kind of a thing, because you have to go through EPC, you have to go through a project developer to really get the equipment exported here. So my comments is, what do you have any chance to talk about your cooperation with Huaneng, the state-owned? Why you pick up Huaneng? Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Pick what you can out of there.
Okay, I'm gonna start with the nuclear first. The United States is the largest producer of electricity from nuclear, 2 times more than any other country in the world. When I say that, often people go, "No, that's France." And the answer is no. The right answer is that we produce more electricity from nuclear than France and Japan together, and they're number 2 and number 3. And there is a nuclear renaissance going on in the world, but not in the United States. And there are 61 reactors being built, 24 of them are under construction in China. And I'm on the board of the World Association of Nuclear Operators. And I believe it's in every nuclear we're the 3rd largest in the U.S. It's in every operator of a nuclear reactor to make sure that we all hold each other accountable to work, to operate in the safest, most reliable way possible. So to me, sharing those kind of practices is something we do in the U.S. between the 104 different reactors in the U.S. that operate. And with WANO, what we're trying to do is expand that same self-regulation, same sharing to all the operators of power plants around the world. So I believe nuclear is the only technology we have today that provides electricity 24/7 with zero greenhouse gases. And China's building it for that reason. They're building it because it's energy independence from their standpoint, and kind of a reason that we ought to think about it also. But this sharing of practices is so important so that we can continue to have safe, reliable operation as these 24 units come online in China. I am cheering for every one of them, and then I'm going to do everything we can as a company and as an organization, WANO, to make sure that we all are operating at the highest levels of reliability and safety.
Is there any a quick comment on her other question? Any of you?
Yes,
Yeah,
for the solar part, basically whenever we're taking the product to the United States, we have to meet their quality requirements, or whatever is the requirement. Like for a panel, we have to meet the UL certification. Otherwise, you cannot install it in the U.S. And for the inverters and all the other part, we pick the best. We don't want to say we pick the cheapest, and we want to make sure our product, our solar farm has the best quality and give the right enough output we are designed.
Okay, we maybe have time for 1, 2 really quick questions. Okay, she's pretty. Just real quick.
Yes, my question is...
Oh, and your name?
Yes, my name is Xiaodong Wang from the World Bank. My question is the energy investment decision in this country, in the U.S., with the absence of carbon tax and carbon trade scheme. You're making Duke company, you're making energy infrastructure investment decision for the next, that will last for the next 30, 40 years. So how do you make such an investment decision under such a regulatory uncertainty, and what your next power plants will be?
That's what keeps you up at night, right?
Actually, this is probably one of the most uncertain times in the history of our industry, and I've been a CEO I have 22 years now, and I've never seen such an uncertain time. There's no clarity with respect to the regulations from EPA on SOx, NOx, mercury, ash ponds, et cetera, on coal. What?
Oh, no, that was just something from, sorry.
And secondly, while we worked hard to get carbon legislation in this session of Congress, it is not likely that anything will pass at this point. And there's an open question about where anything will get passed with respect to putting a price on carbon and the cap on emissions in the next session of Congress. However, I'm in the business of having to make 50-year investments. And if I build a nuclear plant, it's 12 to 14 billion. If I build a coal plant, it's 3 billion. If I build a couple gas-fired combined cycles, it's $1.5 billion. So I'm making long-term decisions. We have a lot of wind. We're building solar. I assume in my decision that carbon will be regulated at some point in the future. So even though the law has not been passed yet, I would not be a good steward of my investors' dollars if I didn't factor that in my decisions about what technology to pick and to build in the future, because I think it's inevitable that it will be regulated in some way in the future.
It started out kind of grim, your answer, and then it got nicer at the end. I appreciate that.
What?
Your response started out, it was really depressing at the beginning, and then it got better. And so I'm a big fan of ending on a positive note. Even though I fancy you all, there's a lot more pent up questions, but I don't think you're like not sprinting away immediately. People can gently tackle you. Also want to note, just
I'm not sure about the tackling part, but they can stop me.
This is D.C. We're wusses. We don't tackle that hard. Do want to note just someone else who you may want to gently go talk to. John here, raise your hand. One of the co-authors at Garten Rothkopf on the report, so technical type questions, you can grab him. But I want to thank all. First of all, can we get more applause for these people? I mean, as we started off, we commented this is it's a unique area of U.S.China energy cooperation. I mean, we pulled the Secretary of Commerce over here because I think he also sees it as quite promising. And I want to thank you guys and wish you luck.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone.